to see Saturday?
Just great effort. You know, guys playing hard, you know, and being physical. You know, we've talked all spring about winning our one-on-ones, you know, winning at the point of attack, and that's what we want to do. I mean, we won't, you know, reinvent the wheel Saturday. Obviously, it'll be, you know, very simple based. You know, just a lot of kids to play as fast as they possibly can play and be as physical as they possibly can be.
Coach mentioned T.J. Neal. Is there anybody else who's really stepped up and grabbed the spot?
Yeah, you know, well, again, starting with TJ, I think TJ's done a heck of a job. You know, he's a kid that's worked really hard. You know, he didn't play, you know, as much as I'm sure he wanted to play last year, but it never stopped him from, you know, being in a classroom and studying and getting a lot of extras. So he's been great. You know, after that, I mean, it's been a lot of guys, you know, that have shown some flashes, you know, here and there, but he's definitely been probably the surprise of the spring.
Where will you play him, Tim? Which linebacker position?
Both. Both. You know, we've really worked hard to try to make those guys a little bit more interchangeable. You know, we want to be able to have the flexibility to, you know, our Mikes can play Will, our Wills can play Mike, and vice versa, because you just never know. We want to be able to go to the next man in, regardless of what position he is, Mike or Will.
How far along do you think your secondary has come from last fall?
I think we've made some strides. I really do. I think, you know, obviously we're still a work in progress, you know, but to say are we better than we were last year, I think we are to this point, you know, because, again, you know, those guys have played. I mean, they got pretty good experience. You know, their eyes aren't as bright. You know, they're kind of taking it in, you know, some of the details of each coverage, and I think they're a lot more confident in terms of playing the ball when the ball's in flight. So I think we're better. You know, how much better? You know, we still got some room.
Who's taking the lead at safety?
Well, Zane Petty, you know, because Zane's played, you know, he started the second half of the season last year, and he made some strides, and he's really picked up where he left off in the fall. You know, he's been very, very consistent, to be honest. You know, that's been his main thing. You know, he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. You know, he's where he needs to be. He's accountable, you know, and as he continues to do that, you know, we'll continue to build and get better.
Kind of a spring as Smoot had.
You know what? Smoot's shown some flashes. You know, again, he's picked up a ton of weight, you know, good weight. You know, he's a lot stronger, you know, more explosive. I think he's about 270, you know, if I'm not mistaken. But he's still running, you know, like he's 245, 250, you know. So we're really pleased with where he's headed, you know. But again, I mean, he's just learning. You know, he's still a freshman technically, you know. So it's some things obviously that he'll be the first to tell you he needs to continue to improve on. But we definitely think he's going to be definitely one of the better players we have.